He did not set out to be anyone's general. He meant to give a thirsty boy water, then ride on. It was late autumn on the high, dry table south of the Canadian River, where the wind combs the grass flat and the horizon refuses to blink. Eli Mercer had 5 head left to deliver and a winter plan that looked like a ledger with too many blank lines. He'd traded away most everything over the years. The blue cavalry coat he'd once worn, a decent mare for a buckboard his neighbor needed, even his wedding band in a spring when the calf crop failed. What he hadn't traded was a habit he learned from a mother who boiled coffee like medicine and believed the only worthwhile courage was quiet. If you see a soul in trouble, you stop. The boy lay half hidden in greasewood and broomweed at a bend, where the wagon ruts took a shallow dip, his face the color of dust, his lips cracked white. The hoof marks around him told a skittered story. Ponies spooked, a small horse going down, a tumble, then a dragging shuffle that petered out. He could not have seen more than 14 summers. His hair was cut in a straight line at the jaw. A single hawk feather was caught by sweat against his temple. 2 arrows were snapped off at the shaft in his side, where someone had tried to move him. One remained buried, fletching, trembling with each shallow breath. Eli dismounted slow, hands out like he was talking to a foal. "Can you hear me, son?" he said. "Water first, always water." He lifted the canteen, tilted 2 careful fingers' worth into the boy's mouth, then dribbled some along the lips to soften them, the way his mother used to do for him when fever and bad dreams came like wolves. The boy's throat worked, his eyes fluttered dark as mesquite beans. He tried to push himself up and couldn't. From the north came dust, a low smear like breath on a mirror. Soldiers, Eli thought at once, a patrol, or settlers with rifles riding fast on rumor. He had no love for either in a hurry. He looked south. Far off, a darker, tighter dust rose, the kind thrown up by ponies moving as one. The people. Not a name from textbooks or newspapers, just how Eli had heard them speak of themselves on nights when firelight makes every face honest. "All right," he told the boy. "I was never good at turning my back on trouble." He cut the shafts, left the arrowheads where they were. He dug one out once, a lifetime ago, and nearly killed the man by doing the wrong thing with the right heart. He tore his shirt into strips, bound the wounds firm enough to keep the boy's breath from rattling itself loose. He slid his arms under ribs and knees and lifted, feeling the boy's weight like a vow he hadn't meant to make. He eased him into his saddle, tied him there with his own belt and a length of lead rope, flipped the stirrup leather to hold the boy's left leg steady, then led the horse toward the low rise to the west, where a clump of juniper would give them a breath or two of cover. They reached the trees as the dust swells met the road. 8 soldiers in a file came first, sacks of wheat dusted over their sleeves, sabers clinking. A lieutenant's hat cocked just so, jaw shaved angry. Behind them, a wagon with 2 women bundled against the wind, faces pinched pale. The soldiers slowed, peered. The lieutenant saw Eli, saw the boy slumped in his saddle, and his face tightened like a cinch pulled too hard. "You there!" he called. "Drop the reins and back away from that savage." Eli did not move. He was tired of men shouting as if the wind weren't doing the job well enough. He raised his hand. "He's bleeding," Eli said, "and he's a child. If your orders say to let a child die when a canteen will save him, you need a new officer or a different god." The lieutenant's cheeks went high with color. He was young, lips chapped with ambition. "We are under instructions from Fort Ellison," he said. "There's been raiding. A rancher's boy shot a warrior and ran. War party on his heels. You will surrender that Indian boy now." "Lieutenant," Eli said, and heard his own voice as if from another time. The iron bed at the surgeon's tent, the wet canvas stink, the bugle at dusk. "You'll do what you think you must, but I served under men who knew the difference between an enemy and a wounded boy. You'll never wash this day off your hands if you make the wrong choice." The women in the wagon looked from one face to the other, like churchgoers tracking a preacher's eyes. One, her hair pinned in a stern bun, that tried and failed to hide kind eyes, spoke soft. "Let him do what's right," she said to the lieutenant. "We had a son, sir. Fever took him. A mother doesn't forget the way a boy's breath sounds when he's fighting to stay." The lieutenant's mouth tightened. He looked at the dust to the south, the second plume now cresting the low swale, ponies moving like river water. He looked at the boy on Eli's horse and saw the glaze of pain wash his eyes. He made a decision that would cost him in whatever barracks he'd bragged his way through. "You have 5 minutes," he said, and pulled his patrol to the left of the road to form a ragged blocking line. "If they come in shooting, I can't protect you." "Wasn't asking you to," Eli said. He tied a white handkerchief to the end of his rifle and stuck it upright in the juniper like the world's smallest flag. The people crested the swale fast, then fanned and slowed, the way a herd will when it recognizes something it cannot eat. A man rode out ahead, bare-chested in the cold save for a vest of beadwork as fine as winter light. His hair was braided in 2 ropes. His horse moved like it had been taught manners by a careful grandmother. He did not reach for his bow. He looked at the boy and then at Eli, and his glance was so precise it felt like being weighed and not found wanting yet. The man swung down, walked the last few steps with his hands open, palms up. 2 other riders flanked him, older men with faces lined like dry riverbeds. "I am Akome," the first man said in plain, careful English learned from traders and tired teachers. "That is my sister's son, Nalin. Who took his blood?" "Arrows came from the west," Eli said. "Snapped off when someone tried to drag him. He was on the ground when I found him. I didn't move the heads. There's a soldier patrol yonder who could have made this worse but didn't. He gave us 5 minutes." Akame took in the lieutenant, the women in the wagon, Eli's calloused, empty hands. 5 minutes is the longest number in any white man's mouth," he said dry, and the older men snorted despite themselves. "You did honor. Now you will do more. Old women taught me a rule we keep among the Tohet, the people by the Red Rock. We call it the rule of returning breath. If you take the breath back into a chest that was ready to leave, you accept the burden to speak for that breath until it walks free again. It is not magic. It is not a trick. It is just a rule that keeps the village from losing its mind." He turned his palm up, showed a scar at the base of his thumb, puckered long and smooth with time. "An oath made with words is smoke," he said. "An oath made with bread and blood is bone. If you take this child to our camp and help our women fix him, if you stand between our anger and the officers' fear, if you put your knowledge of the bluecoat ways between our tents and their guns for 3 dawns, we will call you borrowed hand. You will be under our protection and under our work until the 3rd sunrise. Then we let you go with thanks. That is the old rule." Eli looked at the boy, Nalin, then at Akome, then at the lieutenant and the woman in the wagon with the kind eyes. He thought of his mother's kitchen in Missouri, of a winter when the stove died and neighbors brought bread like signals in the night. He thought of a time he'd run dispatch through a cedar drawer to stop a drunk sergeant from shooting at campfires because he liked the sound, how that little run had made his company hate him for a month and love him for a year. "I will do it," he said. Akome nodded once, the way men nod when luck and duty line up for a blink. He turned to the line of riders behind him and lifted his arm. They did not cheer. They moved like a hand closing gently around a fragile thing. 2 women on painted ponies came forward, their hair wound up with red yarn. They took Nalin from the saddle like he weighed nothing, his head in one woman's lap, the other keeping his breath measured with a gourd rattle whose pebbles ticked time. Eli handed them his last clean bandage and the tiny wad of willow bark powder he kept for pain. One of the women pressed her palm to his forearm, a thanks that spoke without sound. Akome walked with Eli halfway to the soldiers and stopped where the 3 worlds met, ponies, mules, and a tired cow pony with a boy's blood drying on its saddle strings. "You were a blue coat once," Akome said, without making it a question. Eli glanced down at the ghost of a stripe the sun had cut into his skin where a cuff had ridden for a few years too many. "I was a scout," he said. "That means I learned how soldiers think and how they don't. Good, Akome said. We will need both. They stepped out together, men from camps that had watched each other's fires too long. The lieutenant's hand hovered above his pistol, then dropped. He was not a fool every day. You two are talking, he said. That's good. The fort commander rides tomorrow with a column. He's been told this camp lifted a herd and stoved in a settler's wagon. Akome's jaw did not move, but the skin at the corner of his eye did. Our young men took back horses that were ours, he said. The wagon came into our women's bury ground and broke the branches. We did not stove it. We turned it. Turning a man's wagon when his children are inside feels like a kind of stoving to him, Eli said quietly. Akome glanced, then let a breath go he'd been holding. Borrowed hand, he said, trying the words like a new saddle, seeing if it would gall. You will teach me how to carry this talk so that nobody thinks we mean to be small. Eli nodded. And you'll teach me when to keep my mouth shut. We both have a lot to learn before sundown, Akome said, and there was a flicker of humor there, quick as quail. They made the exchange simple and public. Eli stood in the space between Akome and the lieutenant. He spoke first to the officer, then to Akome, and the women in the wagon listened like deacons. To the fort, Eli said. Send a rider today with a message. This camp will be at Willow Bend at sunrise. They will bring the branded horses they took and expect to get back their unbranded horses taken by the settlers 2 weeks ago. They will not come into town. They will wait by the river. They ask for parley under the bluff. If you ride hard, you can reach them. If you ride stupid, you will find only thorns. This is not surrender. It is an exchange with talk. The lieutenant looked at the line of riders behind Akome, counted with his chin. He could see an army in that dust, though it was mostly women, boys, and older men ready to move the camp if pride turned to smoke. He swallowed a hard knot of his own. I'll send the rider, he said, but the colonel is convinced of things. He believes a show of force brings quick peace. The kind of peace that leaves widows, Eli said. I've seen it. I can only write what I see, the lieutenant said, and his voice had less boy in it now. And today I saw you choose mercy, when a mouth like mine told you not to. Akome made a short gesture that was not quite a bow. We will remember that. They parted with the kind of awkward nods men use when what they want to say is too big for the road. The soldiers nudged their horses on. The wagon creaked. The women waved once and tucked blankets around their knees. The people wheeled and flowed south, carrying Nalin like a song you're afraid to breathe wrong. Eli tied his reins, checked the cinch, and followed Akome into a country he had ridden 100 times without once being invited to understand it. The camp lay in a bowl of red stone under a cliff that held the light like honey. Smoke rose from fires where women pounded acorn meal and stewed venison with prickly pear pads to cut the weight of the meat. Children ran with bare feet that slapped the dust like drumskins, then stopped when they saw the boy and made a corridor of silence for him to pass. Old women, their hair white and braided, their hands weathered like cottonwood bark, came from the shade of a long bower and looked him over with eyes that missed nothing. One stepped forward, small, with a back as straight as a lance, a necklace of shell discs that clicked when she breathed. I am Salt Aunt, she said in Eli's language that had no word for him but stranger, and yet made him feel like she was measuring him for an apron, not a grave. You brought my sister's daughter's son. You did not pull the iron from his side. This was wise. You will sit, eat. Then you will listen to how we keep men from spoiling the meat with their pride. She touched his forearm in the same place the younger woman had, but where the first touch had been a thanks, this one was a tether. Eli sat. He ate a bowl of stew that tasted of smoke and patience. He listened, and as the sun turned the cliff from gold to blood, he learned the shape of the rule of returning breath from a circle of grandmothers who had seen too many boys go out with one name and come back with another, or not at all. 3 dawns, Salt Aunt said, no more, no less. The one who brings the breath back stands where the hot words fly and catches them with his body. He speaks when speaking keeps a child from being orphaned. He is quiet when quiet keeps men from playing at bravery for other men's eyes. He does not order our warriors, he orders himself. He does not ride away before the third sunrise, or the old ones take back the breath he borrowed. We made this rule when bison were many and soldiers were few. It still works. Akome looked up at the cliff, at the shallow cave where the sick were kept cool. Will it work when a bluecoat column comes up the river with a bugler who likes the sound of his own brass? He asked. Salt Aunt's mouth tilted. That is why the river has bends, she said, so a man has time to think. Eli felt the weight of what he had agreed to settle on his shoulders, like a blanket that warmed and burdened both. I'll need your best riders, he said softly. Not to fight, to flank. I'll need your women's voices in the morning. By the willows, the colonel you'll meet is deaf in one ear from a cannon burst. He hears men's shouting. He notices women's singing, if only because he can't tell which man to order quiet. We will make him notice his own pace, and I will ride to the advance guard tonight and ruin the breakfast of a man I used to call Sir. Akome's eyes flicked to Salt Aunt's. The old woman nodded, and the necklace clicked like a promise. Borrowed hand, she said, and the name made a small, strange pride rise in Eli's throat. If you die in this, I will tan your hide and hang it as a shade, so you can watch your foolishness cool our fire in summer. Eli laughed then, because there are only two kinds of laughter worth keeping, a child's relief and an old woman's threat. He stood, took a piece of dry bread from the basket, broke it, shared it with Akome. Bread and blood, the chief had said. Smoke and bone. He had saved a boy's breath and borrowed an army he did not own. He had 3 dawns to figure out how to give it back without spending any more than he had to. Night came down with stars so thick it looked like the sky had been salted. In the dark, he heard drums from another camp, faint, then nearer, men practicing the discipline that keeps fear from turning hands stupid. In the canyon, with the willow leaves shivering to their own secret weather, Eli saddled up, checked the cinch again, and headed north. He rode toward the road, and the column he knew would be sitting a mile back, polishing iron that never learned a single lesson from the hands that held it, and he thought, it began with water. It will end with it too if I do this right. Behind him in the cool cave, Narlin breathed shallow but steady, and Salt Aunt sat with a gourd rattle and kept time like a metronome made for heart and bone instead of choir. Somewhere out there, flags gathered at the edge of his knowing. They'd be expecting him to choose a side. For 3 dawns, he would choose a bridge instead. There are a few uses for darkness that have nothing to do with hiding. Eli used the first, moving faster than worry. He reached the road where the river turned and saw the shapes he'd expected. 2 picket fires, a ring of horses ground-tied, a row of sleeping men with their hats over their faces, a sentry stomping against the cold and hating every minute of it. The sentry brought his rifle up when a rider came out of the night. Eli lifted one hand. He was hatless, his hair going white at the edges, and he let the sentry see his face long enough to confuse him. "Who goes?" the sentry said, as if the question could fix anything in the universe. "Breakfast," Eli said, "and bad news." The sentry wavered the way a man does when his orders and his instinct shake hands, and neither one wants to let go. In the end, hunger won. He took Eli to the small knot of officers poring over a crude map by lantern. The colonel was there, heavy in the jaw and light in the patience. He turned, and his eyes narrowed. "I know you," he said. "Scout Mercer." "Not a scout anymore," Eli said. "Today I'm a piece of string tied between 2 mad dogs." "You ride with hostiles?" the colonel asked, tasting the word as if sourness might help him pronounce it. "You understand that's a hanging offense if I choose to read it so. And you understand that word makes widows," Eli said. "They will be at Willow Bend at sunrise. They will bring the branded stock they lifted when one of your settlers cut their winter trail and stole 2 of their unmarked ponies. They want an exchange and talk. They don't want your men in their camp, and you don't want your men in their camp either, unless you like ugly stories. Meet them by the willows. Leave your cannon. Bring your doctor. My doctor. The colonel snorted like a mule taking offense. What, they want a vaccination clinic? They have a child with iron in his side, Eli said. Your doctor will see that leaving the head in until heat loosens the muscle saves a life. Pulling it quick costs one. He might teach something while we take the temperature of this piece. And if things go to hell, an extra pair of clean hands never hurt anybody. The colonel looked at the captain beside him, a man with a face like a dry creek, every line earned. He might be right, the captain said. We go in stupid, we come out carrying men. We go in steady, we come out cursing paperwork. The colonel grunted. You always did prefer paperwork to glory, Finch. I prefer sleep, Captain Finch said. He looked at Eli. You sure about this? Sure is for preachers, Eli said. I'm useful, that's all. They rode at dawn with breath like smoke and hooves quieted by sand. On the far bank, the willow stand moved like something alive. It was alive, Eli corrected himself, the living privacy of a river that has watched men try to name it since before maps taught anyone to pretend a line was a law. The people were there, not in ranks, but in a shape that made sense for them. Older men and women closest to the water, younger men behind, boys whispering to ponies. Women sang in a low, weaving tone that made the curls of fog hesitate before floating away. Akome sat his horse with a stillness that was not stiffness. When he turned his head, you could see the hinge of a plan sliding into place. Salt Aunt stood at the edge of the water with a long stick she used for fishing when talk failed. The colonel reined in 50 paces away, more to make a point than out of fear. He looked past Eli as if the man he'd once trusted was now a window, not a wall. You have horses that aren't yours, he said loudly, and Eli saw the way the colonel's voice made boys on both sides grip things wrong. We are here to take them back. Akame did not answer the colonel. He looked at Eli, and Eli nodded, the small signal of their borrowed oath. Colonel, Eli said, their horses were taken first. Not branded, but theirs. You know as well as I do, brand law and common law make a fine stew of trouble out here. We can settle it with a ledger and a handshake instead of a volley. The herd is here. The rancher who claimed theft is likely not far behind with his own argument. Let's count. We make a list. You release the animals that match their description: scar on the right hip, white sock, left fore, a cut ear. They release the branded stock that was lifted. While our hands are busy with reins and ropes, our mouths can keep from saying things our grandchildren have to pay for. The colonel's jaw worked. He was a man who liked orders because they behaved when ink dried. Maxims like never give ground sat up straight on his mantle. But this river bent in ways his maxims didn't. He had a choice: to snap and maybe be the hero of a story some bar would keep too long, or to bend and be the villain of none. You expect me to let them keep any horse they took because a scar looks familiar? He said. No, Eli said. I expect you to let them keep their own horses and you to get yours back. The settlement north of here cut their berry ground. We both know there's no law about berries in your stack of papers, but there is law in their memory. We'll make new paper today, and it'll hold better because we all watched the ink dry. Salt Aunt stepped forward then, not because the men needed an old woman to save them, but because she was tired of hearing voices that didn't learn. Colonel, she said simply, and her English was slower, like she wanted each word to take root. You have a bad ear. I will stand on that side. And she pointed to his left, the deaf side. So your good ear hears our singing, and not just your own officer's breath. It was not a taunt. It was a strategy from a woman who had seated men at fires long enough to know where to put the kettle so it warms, not scalds. The colonel blinked as if struck, then nodded once because sometimes dignity is rescued by the people you plan to instruct. All right, he said. We count. The counting took all morning, which is the point of counting when tempers are young. Men said, this one, and women said, no, look closer, and boys traced old scars with a kind of reverence reserved for stories that promised to outlast them. The doctor came and knelt by Nalin in the shade of a willow, touched the bandage, nodded approval, and handed Sultan a small paper of clean thread and a needle wrapped in oiled cloth. "For when you warm the iron," he said. "If you need me, I'm here. But the woman knows what to do." Sultan considered the packet like a new tool given into an old craft. "You are a useful man," she said. "You may eat at our fire. Your colonel will survive one meal without you." The colonel scowled at that, which improved everyone's circulation. By noon, tempers had cooled to the point where words didn't sweat. Eli felt the knot in his chest loosen, then tighten again when he saw dust downstream. Different dust, a tight, angry snake of it. Through the slit of willow, he saw riders coming hard, hats low, rifles high, ranch hands, a dozen. He knew that look. He'd seen it in mirrors when he'd been younger and spent 2 nights rehearsing courage that would have been better spent sleeping. Akome saw it too. He raised his hand. His younger men stiffened and shifted like a box of knives when someone lifts the lid. Eli moved without thinking, his hand up, palm out, as if he could hold both sides apart with nothing but skin. "Borrowed hand," Sultan said, and there was warning and iron in it. Eli swung into his saddle, bumped the colonel's knee with his stirrup. The colonel cursed and shifted. Eli rode out to meet the snake of dust before it struck the water. "Turn your horses," he called to the ranchmen. He knew their faces. One he'd bought salt from last spring. One he'd seen lay a calf down so gentle the rope might as well have been made of good advice. "Get out of the way, Mercer," the leader said. "They took 3 of ours. We ride to show them what it costs." "You get your 3, Eli said. "We just counted them. You put a bullet in the river now, and you'll spend the next 10 winters building fences for graves. You like to plant cedar posts, plant crosses instead. You think your wife wants that as a headstone for your boy because you couldn't let a paper carry the heat for you today. This is about more than horses," the ranch hand blurted. "They came through our place as if we weren't there. They came through your place because you put your place on their winter walk," Eli said. "This is about maps you've never seen and memories you can't measure. That's all right. You don't have to measure them today. You just have to count horses like a man who can read a brand when the sun is wrong." The rancher's jaw worked. Pride and practicality fought in him like dogs under a porch. Behind Eli, the colonel's bugler lifted a horn out of habit, not thought. Eli wheeled. "Put that down," he said. The bugler blinked, insulted. "Lieutenant," Eli snapped, and the young officer straightened as if the word had his name stitched into it. "If your bugler calls anything today but halt, you will write a letter to a mother tonight." The lieutenant looked at the colonel. The colonel looked at the river. He wanted to show force, to lay the big shape of his power on the table like a poker hand, but he saw what Eli saw now. Women on both shores, ready to step in front of boys who thought glory and grief were cousins. He saw his own doctor eating stew at a fire he had been trained never to approach. He saw Sultan standing in the wrong place for his deaf ear and the right place for his pride. "Halt!" he said to the bugler at last, and the man put horn to mouth and blew 2 notes that made even the insects pause. The rancher's horses flicked their ears. Akome's men lowered their bows a hair. The sound hung over the water like a decision you could not take back. Eli turned back to the ranchers. "You hear that?" he asked softly. "That's a sound you'll want to be able to live with. Let's finish the count. You see your brand, you take your rope. You see a scar that looks like your hand remembered it. Fine, make your claim in front of the colonel and Sultan, and we'll argue like men who plan to see the same sunrise tomorrow. But you run your horses at this water, and I will put my gelding between you and every foolish choice you've been meaning to make since you grew whiskers." The leader's eyes flickered. He saw Eli not as a man blocking him, but as an older version of himself, the difference between rage and steadiness measured in grey hairs and 1,000 miles of fence. "Fine," he bit out. "We count." They counted. They argued about a nicked ear and a brand someone had heated dull and laid crooked. They settled with a second rope thrown and a witness nodding. Paper was made, names, marks, the colonel's ribboned scrawl, and Akome's careful X done with a dignity that had nothing of shame in it. A boy ran a wet finger along the ink to make it shine. Salt Aunt took a willow twig and cut it clean in half, gave one piece to the colonel and one to the rancher. "When a stick breaks this neat," she said, "it is because the wood is willing." By late afternoon, the herd split and moved like two schools of fish going around a rock. The ranchers took theirs north, already bragging about how it was their idea to count. The colonel assembled his men and managed not to give a speech. The doctor packed his bag and put a hand on Narlin's shoulder, gentle as a prayer. The people turned toward camp with less steel in their backs. Eli swung down and felt the tremble in his own legs only when his boots hit sand. Akome came and stood with him where the water makes small sounds that grown men pretend not to hear. "Borrowed hand," he said. "2 dawns. 1 remains." "By morning," Eli said, "your sister's son will be out of the cave. Salt Aunt will make him curse the thread and bless the broth. By tomorrow night he'll sleep on his side without seeing stars. The 3rd dawn is a good one to send a man on his way." Akome nodded. "We have a gift when you go." "I need no gifts," Eli said. Akome's mouth did that small tilt again. "It is not for you," he said. "It is for our rule. If we don't feed a rule, it goes skinny and starts looking for meat in the wrong places." They walked back to camp in a dusk that made everything honest again. The women sang a song that turned the day's argument into a story small enough to carry without straining. The young men looked at Eli now without the stiffness men reserve for those they've been told to fear. Narlin, propped on rolled blankets, looked away in the embarrassed way boys do when they realize people have been putting their lives into baskets for them around the clock. Salt Aunt sat with her rattle, then set it down and took Eli's hand. "Your mother taught you to stop the first time," she said, "but you learned to stop the second time by yourself." "What's the second time?" Eli asked. "The time you stop yourself from speaking when your clever tongue wants to show off," she said. "Many men fail at the second stopping. They make trouble sound smart." He laughed, and it was the kind of laugh that feels like a stitch being pulled and skin coming together under it. On the 3rd morning, the sky was white and close like a washed sheet. The camp stirred early. Fires were small. Packs lay ready. Even when peace is made, a camp knows to be ready to move. Akome stood with Eli by the juniper that had first held the scrap of white on his rifle. "Our oath ends at this sun," he said. "You have spoken when you should and eaten when my aunt told you. These are both honorable things." Eli looked at the boy, Narlin, who stood on his own now, one arm in a sling made from a soft old shirt someone had cut carefully. He looked taller than 3 days could make him, which is what happens when a boy's eyes learn something his legs haven't caught up to yet. The boy came and stood in front of Eli and held out a small pouch made of brain-tanned hide, stitched neat, dyed with something that left a memory of late berries. "For your tobacco," Narlin said, and his English was the kind children learn in the space between laughter and grammar. "Or for your bread, or for the little things men carry and don't tell anyone about." Eli took the pouch. He did not trust his voice, so he nodded with that half-smile men use when they want to cry in a room full of people who have better uses for tears. Akome lifted his chin at the ridge to the north, and Eli followed his eyes. On that line of red rock where the world remembers it was once fire, figures stood, many, not soldiers, not cowboys, but the village itself, women, boys, old men with staffs, a wall of life watching 2 men end a vow in the way vows should end, without trumpets, without speeches, with a plain exchange and a better understanding of where to stand next time. "Do you see them?" Akome asked. "I do," Eli said. "They waited for your command 2 days ago," Akome said quietly. "Not because you own their hands, because you owned your own. A man who holds his own hand steady can tell another man to wait without turning that man into a dog." Eli stood long enough to let the truth of that settle like heat in a stone. He had indeed told an army to wait, an army of impulses, of boys ready to impress each other, of men in blue coats and men in wool vests, of horses with more sense than their riders, of fear and pride masquerading as policy. He had told them to wait, and they had, if only because a borrowed hand had risen at the river and made waiting seem like a thing a decent man might try once. Salt Aunt came last, because elders always come last. They like to see if the back of the line needs mending. "Borrowed hand," she said, "we feed you one more thing before you go." She handed him a folded paper, stiff with the kind of careful writing a government clerk thinks will outlast storms. "It is what your colonel gave me when he ate our stew," she said. "He wrote that the Willow Bend is a recognized place of talk, that horses will be counted there before a bullet is loaded. He stamped it with his ribbon and his name. Put it in that little pouch so your pockets don't eat it." Eli slid the paper into the pouch beside a twist of coffee and the stub of a pencil. He tied the pouch to his belt. He looked at Akome, at Nalin, at Salt Aunt, at the ridge of waiting faces. "I have one gift," he said, and he surprised himself by hearing his mother's voice under his own. He reached into his saddlebags and pulled out a tin cup, the kind his mother had stirred stew with so many nights the lip was dented where she'd tapped a spoon. He had carried it through all his trades and losses without really knowing why. "This belonged to a woman who taught me that feeding a rule keeps it from eating you," he said, and put the cup into Salt Aunt's hand. "Use it when the talk runs dry. Dip it in the water. Remind the boys that thirst is older than glory, and remind the officers that a woman who knows how to portion broth can ration pride, too." Salt Aunt took the cup like a sacrament. "Your mother is alive while we use this," she said. "She would like that," Eli said. He swung into his saddle, then because staying too long is its own kind of rudeness. He raised his hand, and the ridge of people raised theirs back, a wave that rolled across rock like light. He turned his horse north, toward the hard land and the softer choices that lay in it. He had cattle to winter, fences to mend, a neighbor's wagon tongue to splice, 100 small duties no bugle will ever call men to, but that hold a place together far longer than any fanfare. At the first rise, he looked back once. The camp had already begun to move, smoke folding itself, bedding rolled, children running, the cliff holding the morning like a bowl. Akome stood by the willow, tiny at that distance, and lifted a hand. One last ordinary salute that meant, "We did not make ourselves gods today, we made ourselves neighbors." Nalin stood beside him, alive because a stranger wouldn't ride on, stronger because the women agreed to teach him the weight of a rule that kept boys on the right side of a brink. Eli touched the pouch at his belt. He felt the crisp corner of paper, the softness of tanned hide, the grit of coffee. He thought of the river bend and the sound of halt floating over water, and the way it had felt to tell an army to wait and have them obey, not with fear, not with worship, but with the calm that comes when a man sees a side of himself he'd like to keep. He rode on, and the country opened like a book he would never finish. The story would find him again. Stories do, if you keep your hand steady and your heart quiet enough to hear footsteps. For now there was the road, the wind, and the knowledge that sometimes a fateful decision isn't a cliff. You don't jump. Sometimes it's a river. You walk in, let it braid around your knees, and you say to fevered men on both banks what mothers have always said to boys who would fight over sticks: wait, count, share. Then you point to the bend and show them where the shade is, and you let the old rules do the work they were made to do, hold a village together until the next dawn rises and makes everyone honest again.